Welcome to What's the Big Book Actually Saying, Step 12, Part 3. I think there may be 5 or even 6 videos in this Step 12 series. There's just so much information packed into our Step 12 chapter of the Big Book, Working with Others. What we're looking at now is the conversation or the period, I should say, after the initial 12-step conversation, the second visit and beyond, where perhaps in the modern world of AA, a newcomer has decided to be a newcomer, to come to meetings, to start to talk to members or to you in particular regularly, etc. They may have even decided to start working through the Big Book with you to learn more about their alcoholism and our solution. This part of the Big Book still contains suggestions, which I've chosen to numeralise so that they stick out a bit more, but the suggestions are almost at paragraph length at times. And so I've themed each suggestion in brackets today to make it a little bit easier to see what the particular suggestion is talking about. Let's get straight into it. So we pick up where we left off from the last time. Suppose now you are making your second visit to a person. And as I say, I believe that many of these suggestions that we're about to read go way beyond the second visit alone. It reads, they have read this volume and say they are prepared to go through with the 12 steps of the program of recovery. Well, that's a really interesting starting point. It seems to suggest that we do things differently these days. Let's go back to that first conversation, that 12-step conversation. And it is suggested we leave the prospect with the book and they've had a read. And therefore, they've armed themselves with certain information and they want to go through with the 12 steps. And yes, we would say that means they're approaching you as a sponsor. But we have to remember that, back when this book was written, sponsorship was at best different than it is today. But let's continue on the basis that they're all in at least on getting to meetings, on looking at the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous as a strong suggestion for them to explore so that they don't have to pick up a drink anymore. It continues, don't insist. Having had the experience yourself, you can give them much practical advice. Let them know you are available if they wish to make a decision and tell their story, but do not insist upon it if they prefer to consult someone else. And I guess this is why working with others is often seen as a chapter on sponsorship in the contemporary sense of sponsorship. But obviously this first suggestion suggests that it's a little bit different than that this is just someone who is having their second contact with Alcoholics Anonymous. And yes, they've read the book, but they, are still assessing their options. And you may not be the person who ends up taking them through the 12 steps, but you may be. But the idea is, don't push. Don't go, oh, that's amazing. Come on in to my house and I'm going to take you through the steps and here's a whole bunch of things and do 90 and 90 and all that stuff that we tend to do these days. I think it's interesting that, there's no telling them what to do at all in this part of the Big Book. All we need to do is let them know that you're available if they wish to make a decision and tell their story. It's an invitation to disclose or not. 2, providing short-term aid. They may be broke and homeless. If they are, you might try to help them about getting a job or give them a little financial assistance. 3, your family. But you should not deprive your family or creditors of money they should have. And so there's this idea of, it's almost in contemporary terms, you'd be going, don't get all codependent and controlling about this person and their life and their situation. Have some boundaries, but be prepared to assist to some degree if you feel that's required. 4, taking newcomers in. Perhaps you will want to take them into your home for a few days. And my wife and I have done that on occasion. But be sure you use discretion. So again, there's this sense of boundaries, we might say today. Be certain they will be welcomed by your family and that they are not trying to impose upon you for money connections or shelter. Permit that and you only harm them. You will be making it possible for them to be insincere. you may be aiding in their destruction rather than recovery. So, we have to always go back to, don't we, the idea of, newcomers being pretty self-centered. What does it say around the step 3 and step 4 sections of the big book? We are an extreme example of self-centeredness, run riot. And I think what that part of the big book is talking about is someone at this point in their recovery, that they were drinking yesterday or the day before and now they want help, but their intentions may be very blurry. Here it says insincere. So again, let's be the older sober members and have some boundaries, some discretion. Selflessness, but then it goes on to talk about, our side of the fence and being selfless. It says, never avoid these responsibilities, but be sure you are doing the right thing if you assume them. Helping others is the foundation stone of your recovery. A kindly act once in a while isn't enough. You have to act the Good Samaritan every day if need be. So this starts the theme of 12-step work and even sponsorship and all that work we do with each other on recovery and being sober. It's all recovery. It isn't service. And it says that here. Helping others is the foundation stone of your recovery. So I have to work my 12th step often to assist someone with their first step. But either way, it's step work, and the steps are stemming from recovery, not service, not unity, not our 2 other legacies in Alcoholics Anonymous. And so there's a little caution here in the 5th suggestion. Yeah, we need to be selfless, but we need to do it with boundaries. We need to assess whether we're doing the right thing. So our defects of character, which we've started to ask God to remove at steps 6 and 7, we know that they're always lurking about. We know that they come up probably on a daily basis with most of us. So that steps 6 and 7 need to be used here. God, if I'm about to help this newcomer, please take away the defects of character that only serve me and not you. A prayer like that might be really helpful. I've found that to be the case, that, I don't want to be the hero riding in on the white pony to save the day with this person. I have to remember that I'm a controlling person, like so many human beings are, nothing to do with my alcoholism, but with my character defects, which aren't my alcoholism. We've all got character defects, alcoholic or not, but, I've got to make sure that my intentions are on point. Okay, so I'm not aiding in my destruction rather than recovery, going back to the 4th suggestion. Let's move on. It then moves into some examples of just what being this good Samaritan every day, this hardcore life of self-sacrifice and giving to others that's going to keep us sober, what that looks like when it comes to working with others. Quite a number of them. How many? I think there are 8. It may mean the loss of many nights' sleep, great interference with your pleasures, interruptions to your business. And I've certainly found that to be the case. They often ring in the middle of the night. Anyway, it may mean sharing your money and your home, counselling frantic partners and relatives, innumerable trips to police courts, sanitariums, hospitals, jails and asylums. For me personally, I think it's only the sanitariums, jails. Oh, actually, no. Just the jails. Well, in the modern world, we'd probably talk about psych wards, wouldn't we? We don't really have asylums anymore, but hopefully we can make those connections. A lot of that stuff has been part of my recovery at the 12th step. And of course, we do this because it's part of our responsibility by being an AA member who has recovered. But equally, it can be the high point of my life. Perhaps not at 3 a.m. when I'm actually doing something with a newcomer, but later on I think, well, okay, that was of benefit to me and that other person. That's pretty cool. Your telephone may jangle at any time of the day or night. True. My telephone jangled at 6 o'clock in the morning only yesterday. Actually, it might have been a Skype call, but it still jangled. Your spouse, and I've changed that from wife, your spouse may sometimes say they are neglected. I'm married to an alcoholic, so that's not the case these days, but when I started doing 12-step work, when I started being a recovered member of this fellowship and being, responsible for, my part in assisting newcomers, I often got this feedback from my previous spouse. And to be honest, the balancing act between being a part of this fellowship and considering members of my family, I found really difficult early on to get right. We move on. A drunk may smash the furniture in your home or burn a mattress. Well, at least you can say this part of the big book isn't kind of sprucing up the nobility of 12-step work, is it? Yeah, you may have to fight with them if they are violent. That hasn't happened to me, but I know many members where it has. Sometimes you will have to call a doctor and administer sedatives under their direction. And so obviously this goes to, the idea of knowing which doctor to call and, yes, paramedics no doubt have been called innumerable times as part of 12-step work in the modern world. Another time you may have to send for the police or an ambulance. Occasionally you will have to meet such conditions, and I've certainly found that to be the case. Involving authorities. At meetings, for example, I've seen that happen as well when someone's been a little bit under the influence and therefore out of control. But it's all to the greater good, as long as our intentions are about assisting that person in the appropriate way. We're asking God for guidance. There's someone at my door. Hopefully my wife will answer and I can keep doing this video. Homestay duration. We seldom allow an alcoholic to live in our homes for long at a time. It is not good for them, and it sometimes creates serious complications in a family. That is true. It can. And again, balance. Yes, we take people in, but we've got to have some boundaries. When and how to give. It is not the matter of giving that is in question, but when and how to give. That often makes the difference between failure and success. And this, of course, goes back into how we work our program. Please, God, give me advice on how to help others. And, of course, this goes into even step 11, where we think about the day ahead. And if we know where to assist someone or take someone into our house, God, give me the guidance to have, the right inspiration, the right idea at the right time, etc., etc. Step 8 here. The 12-step work is recovery, not service. Now, that is me, I guess, putting a spin on this, but we are in the recovery part of the big book, and I do hear many people call 12-step work service. But let's read what the big book says about this. The minute we put our work on a service plane, the alcoholic commences to rely upon our assistance rather than upon God. And I guess this is a critical thing. Reliance on the fellowship is important for newcomers, but, our job is to not, as my sponsor might say, to God block people or to become their higher power. Now, that's interesting too, because I know that in the step 4 part of the 12 and 12, it talks about, well, if we've got no higher power and know where to start, we'll start with AA, start with the members. But it's interesting, by the step 11 chapter of the 12 and 12 book, it's sort of challenging that notion and almost encouraging the newcomer to move on to a deeper, wider sense of a higher power. So, yes, reliance upon members is a really important part of every newcomer's experience, I feel, or it can be. But that's a starting point, not a continuous ending point. And that's what's being suggested here. It's all about members of Alcoholics Anonymous encouraging other members of Alcoholics Anonymous to consider relying upon God, because God is the solution. Relying on AA members alone, possibly riskier. 8 continues. The clamours for this and that, claiming they cannot master alcohol under material needs unless material needs are cared for. And then they go, nonsense. Okay, that's a really strong, powerful, almost tough love concept here. Yeah, don't listen to their excuses. Some of us have taken very hard knocks to learn this truth. Job or no job, spouse or no spouse, we simply do not stop drinking so long as we place dependence upon other people ahead of dependence on God. So, we can't be the savior of other newcomers. We can't be the person constantly giving advice to people when they're vulnerable and susceptible. That can be a little bit dangerous. We have to, as much as we can, it says here, encourage the newcomer to start to rely on God rather than other human beings or a better life circumstance as soon as possible. And it ends, this section ends at least, we can all get well. Burn the idea into the consciousness of every man, my apologies, man, woman, person, that they can get well regardless of anyone. The only condition is that they trust in God and clean house. Now, note, the love gets a little tougher and more direct once a newcomer has committed to become a member, accept your help and guidance, etc. There's no notion of burn the idea, that last point, in the first conversation we have with them. It's all about, a lighter touch. So as that newcomer goes further into Alcoholics Anonymous, we can start to become not abrupt, but very clear and direct in our messaging, because their life's on the line, right? From here, we move on to what almost reads like sponsorship support. We start to look at the life circumstance of newcomers when they come into the fellowship. It starts with divorce and moves on. But it's, as I say again, not necessarily just a sponsorship chapter. There's a lot of good advice for sponsorship and working with newcomers, but that's the point. It's about working with newcomers in a more general sense. And I know I was lucky. I went to the right meetings and met the members, or the right members who gave me a lot of the support that I've just been sharing with you today. And it really helped grow my spiritual life and dependence of God, on God, not them. And wouldn't it be great if we all had at least a chance at that kind of experience as newcomers in this marvelous fellowship? And on that note, have a happy, sober day.